Go ahead. Name your favorite Detroit Lions pick. The one pick that everybody secretly hoped would happen, but they didn't want it to happen in the first round. They didn't want it necessarily even to happen in the second round. But when we traded back and we ended up in the third round and we drafted Hendon Hooker, everybody was super excited. And the thought process behind drafting Hendon Hooker, and don't worry, I'll get to how they're about to shock everybody. The thought process on how they were about Hendon Hooker was this. It was twofold. One, you got a guy that doesn't pressure Goff right now because he tore his ACL, but he is a first-round talent going in the third round because of said torn ACL. That combined with the fact that he was 25, combined with the fact that he's in a gimmicky offense at Tennessee. So you have these things all together and you start wondering to yourself, like, yeah, he dropped for a reason, but you still feel like you got a steal there. So then the second reason behind everybody loving the pick is because he would be a good option. At least a lot of people are thinking that if Jared Goff is demanding too much money in 2 years, because we have Jared Goff under contract this year and next year for between $30 and $32 million. Honestly, not a bad deal on a quarterback, especially a quarterback that played the caliber of quarterback that Jared Goff played last year. And trust me, I just went and rewatched all the games. And I know I'm a nerd, right? But I went and rewatched all the games because I wanted to ask myself, were certain players playing as well as I really thought they were based on my maybe revisionist history or something like that? Jared Goff was that good. He still struggled with pressure in his face, but it got better. He was unbelievably accurate and he was elite in many games. And I would make the argument that the season that Jared Goff had last year was equal to or better than any season Matt Stafford has had in Detroit, just on a how well they play quarterback level. I really am going to make that argument. And when you see Amon-Ra St. Brown, he's the reason that he's good, but Goff did not hurt that. So we think that Hendon Hooker is a guy who might be able to replace Goff because you don't want to pay Goff 45, 50 million, something like that. Well, here is the shocking thing. The Detroit Lions have had dialogue with Jared Goff's agent about a contract extension. We're 2 years out. And according to the GM, Brad Holmes, they have entered preliminary discussions with Jared Goff about a contract extension. That means that they believe that this is not just, hey, we got Ben Johnson here and Jared Goff works well with him. They believe that Jared Goff is the quarterback today. He is the quarterback tomorrow, next year, in 5 years. They believe Jared Goff is the guy. You don't start contract extension talks. Now, we don't know what these are going like, all right? But here's what was said. We've had internal dialogue there. And we've had dialogue with his agent. So they've talked to Goff himself and they talked to Jared Goff's agent. And we're in a good place right now. So they've had these things. And then Goff said, of course you'd be open. It hasn't been brought to my attention, but yeah, of course, open to anything. Not up to me. I'm a player. I don't make those decisions. And if I did, I would have made that decision a long time ago. Give me and all my friends all the money in the world, but I just get to play. And if that comes about, that'd be great, but we will see. All right. Then he went on to talk about Hendon Hooker, because I think a lot of us are thinking, well, what about Hendon Hooker? Like, did we spend a third round pick on a guy just to be a backup quarterback forever? Yes, that's where that's maybe, and that's not a horrible thing either. But Hendon Hooker still is going to write his own story to an extent. But here was my thought. This is how I thought everything was going to go down. You're going to draft Hendon Hooker. He's going to be getting better. When you're in the final year of Goff's contract, you start having these conversations, but you've been able to see Hendon Hooker. You've been able to see him at least 90% healthy And you're going to get an understanding of how well does he understand the playbook? How well can he understand NFL schemes? How well can he read a defense? Can he do more complex reads? Really, at Tennessee, what they did with Hendon Hooker was they would have him look to one side of the field. Watch his tape. You can even see it. He would look either right or left side of the field. And their design was to get receivers running open, and it was a high-low read. High-low read. And it takes decision making, but it's one side of the field. It's not look to the left, look off a receiver, come back to the right, scan the field, It's none of that. It's a quick read, get it out of your hands. Everything's up tempo type of thing. It's not just that the plays are up tempo and quick. The reads are quick. The reads are up tempo. They're on one half of the field. So you have to, my thought was that they're going to get in here. They're going to give him a year. They're going to give him a year and a half. They're going to see what his understanding is, how fast his processor, if he can look at the whole field, what his accuracy is, what his health level is. And if he is where Jared Goff is, then you just keep paying him $1 million, right? Or I don't know what it is in the third round. It's not a ton. You keep paying him about $1 million. And you say to Jared Goff, you can go because Hendon Hooker for $1 million or you for 50. We don't need as good of a player. But if they're already entering into contract negotiations, that's massive. And I'm wondering if the thought process is if we can get into contract negotiations with Jared Goff right now, and we have 20 million in cap space, and we can take about 10 to 15 million of that and put it into signing bonus now and move it across. Like all of a sudden that contract, if it's like a 4-year, 180 million, let's say 45 million a year. Well, now maybe by the time we know our cap salary or situation's good now, and by the time you have to start paying these other guys like Sewell and Jonah Jackson. I don't know why I almost said Johnson. When some of these other players are going to start getting handed the bag, all of a sudden Jared Goff isn't on the hook for 45 million a year, but his cap hit's only sitting at like 30 or 35. And you might be able to fudge it enough where that is the case. So all of a sudden, once again, Brad Holmes is thinking miles ahead. When he says these things, we can maybe figure out what he's thinking if we're smart enough. But again, he's miles ahead and he's thinking to himself, I don't want to be pigeonholed into having Hendon Hooker be our quarterback. So if we know Goff is good and we know the cap number is not that bad, it does one of two things. It does two things, honestly. Either it allows us, if we do the deal earlier, to have a better cap number in those back 4 years of his actual contract. Works for him. He gets the money. Works for us. It doesn't cost as much later. And it makes him more tradable because he doesn't have as much guaranteed money left on his contract. So if you end up going that route, but that's not where we're going. Like Jared Goff was really good last year. And he was really good the last 7 games the year before. And I think we just need to buckle up and settle in. And instead of everybody being big Hendon Hooker fans, just realize like the Detroit Lions might shock everybody and re-sign Jared Goff early, even after drafting Hendon Hooker. I don't think anybody thought this was coming. All right, leave your comment below. Did you see this coming 2 years in advance of his next contract? Will the contract get done, or do preliminary talks take 2 years? Let me know in your comments below. Hit that subscribe button. We'll see you on the next.